Hello, everyone. I'm David Marquez, and welcome to the first Marquez Mentality. It's a show where we're going to bring people together from around the United Wrestling Network. And this particular episode for this week is broadcasters, announcers, interviewers, commentators, the people who make up the broadcast team. And before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge what's going on in the world at the moment in the climate. We are going to have a little bit of fun here, but that's not to take away from the seriousness of what's happening coast to coast, not just here in America, but around the world. So we, like everyone who is viewing this, no matter where you're at, to know that we do support your efforts and continue to go out there and fight the cause. We support you 100%. Okay, well, now let's get to this. So who you see here is a small collective of the people over the years. We invited many people to be a part of this, but some of them are out in the streets being loud. Some people have other arrangements. Some people, like Joe Galley, is doing both. He's at work and out in the streets reporting on the situations at hand. But as you can see going across and around, there's a lot of familiar faces. You have Jeremy McKee, the Arizona graphic behind him. He is a broadcaster there for us, but also our social media wizard for the United Wrestling Network. And I think next to me is James Kincaid. He is our host in San Francisco on KGO 87. Next to him is Dan Joseph, our United Wrestling Network television champion. And you folks may remember him for the couple of years you were broadcasting on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. He's also the Jeremy's partner in Arizona. Then you got Emily right there below. She is also on the Arizona program as our backstage interviewer. And next to her is longtime interviewer Grant Pachoco from Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, who has gone on to become a puppeteering maven of his own, and soon we'll talk about even purchasing one of his creations. Next to him, there he is, Nick Bonanno, a jack of all trades. Carl Mandick, also a newsman who has been out of the news business for a while, but he's been with us for a long time, actually, now that I think about it. He's held many hats in the United Wrestling Network. And then right on the other side, you got Dustin and Maria, the Stars from Memphis. They're our hosts of Championship Wrestling presented by Pro Shingle on CW30 in Memphis. And then there's this guy right here, Johnny LaQuasto, who we've not seen in a while. You've seen him on a grander scale most recently, but John was with us for many, many years across all of our platforms. Then next to him, you got Andrew, who is still a part of the team, even though he's taken a knee for a minute. And right next to him is, that's a good face, Andrew. Right next to him is John Roberts. John Roberts, of course, is a correspondent for us on both programs, and he hosts his own version of Championship Wrestling in Amarillo, Texas on CBS 10. Then right down there, you got Blake Troop. Blake has joined us most recently as a color analyst and our combat specialist on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. And then the man, there he is, Todd Kennelly. That's it. And so this is our collective this time around, gang. And we hope you enjoy what we're going to see. We're going to talk about some fun times and just get to know these folks just a little bit more. I guess I should say, too, if you don't know by now, outside of the administrative side, I have been a commentator, a color commentator, an interviewer, a voiceover guy for the United Wrestling Network from the beginning. But I'm sure you folks know that. In sport, my dog is having a heart attack, so let's see if we don't get interrupted by him. So let's start with you, Jeremy. You have an awful lot of, first let's just ask this question, a general question, and even if you just want to raise your hand or however this works instead of all of us talking over each other, I'll start with Jeremy. Why wrestling?
Why wrestling? Well, I grew up a fan. I remember being introduced to Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper back in around the time of WrestleMania 2. When I was in 5th grade, and another student showed me Pro Wrestling Illustrated, brought it into school, and invited me over to the house to watch some VHS tapes, and it wasn't long before I was hooked, and I've watched it ever since.
And this is something you've always wanted to just get into?
Yeah, I mean, early on, I wanted to be a wrestler early on, and my parents kind of talked me out of that. But thought I wanted to then be a manager, wanted to be Bobby the Brain Heenan or Jesse Ventura on commentary. But I don't think I ever quite thought I'd get to that point of actually being on commentary. So it's pretty amazing that I'm here with all of you guys, and honored to be here as part of this group. But just became a huge wrestling fan. Actually decided to pursue journalism in college after a letter I wrote to the editor of Pro Wrestling Illustrated was published in the letters to the editor section about Shawn Michaels and the Rockers and how they should be on the cover of the magazine. And I thought that was so cool to see my name in writing. I decided to become a sports writer and pursued a journalism degree and wanted to go into sports writing initially.
Got it. Now, I'm going to go to Grant real quick. Because of the magazine connection, and I know Grant's history a little bit. Grant, too, you were published in a wrestling magazine too, weren't you?
That's right. I was in an early WWF magazine, King Kong Bundy on the cover. My letter saying why Jimmy Hart was the greatest manager of all time was published in there. And I very much like Jeremy, it was after the first WrestleMania, one of the kids had gone and had a program. And I was like, what is this? I don't know what this is. And then a few months later, my dad goes, we're going on a special trip to try to guess where it is. We're going to go Saturday night. And I was like, I don't know. And I was guessing all these things. And he goes, we're going to go to the Oakland Coliseum and see Hulk Hogan. And, but yeah, so, and I fell in love with it then and Jimmy Hart was my go-to guy. And career day in 6th grade, I dressed as Jimmy Hart because that's who I wanted to be. And then, I went into acting and other things and comedy and all that kind of stuff. And then was very happy when you, Dave, and Mike Coughlin came up to me and were like, hey, you want to come do some backstage interviewing? And I was like, heck yes, I would love to.
Now, to add to your Jimmy Hart story, not many people get to meet their idols or the people they rated. You not just know Jimmy, you own some of Jimmy's stuff.
Yes, now you're making me sound like I'm a stalker, but
oh, sketchy there.
No, his son before.
Oh, now they stabbed you.
Well,
Frozen. He's out.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
I blame that dirty Jerry Lawler. Speaking of which,
His son, the son
out
is
of Memphis. Oh, Grant's back. You back? No, he's not. Okay, Memphis.
Every now and then, Grant will blink.
I know. Grant, you're going in and out on us.
He can't violate the gag order.
But now, okay, so let's go to Memphis. So, Dustin, obviously you're an in-ring talent on top of being a broadcaster. So what got you involved? Boy, this just messed my whole eyesight up. What really wanted you to make you a wrestler? Why did you become a wrestler?
Well, I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. That's the beginning and the end. So back before all the professional sports teams, the Memphis Grizzlies, and of course we have the Redbirds here that are a farm team for the St. Louis Cardinals. But before we had all that, and even before the Memphis Tigers were a big deal in basketball or football, gosh, it was wrestling. And Channel 5, Saturday Morning Wrestling, they would do over a 50 rating on a Saturday, which means that pretty much everybody in the city of Memphis was watching. So the Jimmy Hart stories, growing up watching Jimmy Hart and the King and all that kind of stuff, there was never, ever a question for me that's all I wanted to do was be a wrestler. Maria, too.
I was going to just say, Maria, I know you love professional wrestling.
Yeah, my story is actually quite the opposite. Dustin and I dated for 3 years before I even got into the ring because I had really no interest in wrestling. So sorry to break everyone's heart. But I was the on-field announcer for the Memphis Redbirds, and we actually had a local promoter here, which was Jerry Lawler's son, say, hey, Maria's hot and she can talk, so let's get her to the ring with you. And
there's
I was
no way she's getting into wrestling. And he said, ask her about TV. And so that was kind of the thing.
That was it. He said, there's going to be TV. And I said, okay, I'm in.
And then, just like all of us, once you go out there and you do it and you perform, it's like a drug. You get addicted. You want more and more of it. And I know you've had a lot of fun.
Hey, the South gets pretty crazy. I've had water bottles thrown at me. I mean, it's pretty intense down here.
No, for sure. Now, just quickly, how do you enjoy working with your husband, or would you rather just be a free agent and go on your own?
Well, we've kind of evolved into like this power couple, so to speak. So we do everything together now. We do the wrestling, and then we also host CW30 outside of wrestling. Like, we're the face of that network.
That's right.
And then we also host the Redbirds together now. So we work together a lot.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to jump over to Emily real quick because she has a similar situation. And since we're kind of pulling the curtain back altogether, you know Robert Baines very well. Not only here, but then all of us, we know what's going on. But what brought you into wrestling outside of Brandon?
Yeah, so I would say Brandon Taylor, the creator of the Hobo or Robert Baines, he introduced me to wrestling. And I came from a theater background. I came from a producing background. And so he introduced me. He was like, you need to watch this because this is theater, but with athletes. And there's such a theatricality about it that you're going to fall in love with it. So I remember I watched The Undertaker for the first time and I was hooked. And I was like, this is incredible because you could tell stories. You can like connect with fans. You can connect with an audience in ways that like I've never seen before, even in live theater. And so I was hooked, and I followed his career and his path. And I was actually his manager and kind of valet back in the beginning of the Hobo days. And so I was, in the side of the ring and was hooked then. And I took a little hiatus where I was focusing on producing, and I still missed it. I still was like longing to do stuff. And, we're kind of that power couple too, where like he does production work for New Japan, and I like have helped with that. And because I'm like, I got to get involved. So I just like threw myself in, and I'm super lucky that like Arizona embraced me when I was like, hey, I want to do this. And, so.
Cool. All right. So Blake, I'm not sure if your transition into pro wrestling is unique or not. Ronda Rousey, Dan Severn, other mixed martial arts fighters getting into professional wrestling. But when I met you, you were a competitor in the Southern California area outside of doing other bigger shows on the national scale. But I got to know you more and more through Steve Bash and George in here in the Valley, as we, David Marquez Productions, produces a lot of MMA and boxing events for those promotions. So when we initially got together, I had an idea of how that we can include you, and we brought you in as a broadcaster. Did you grow up a wrestling fan as a kid?
I did. Wrestling was my first love. I grew up watching WCW and WWF. Back WWF, like it took me a while to get used to switch to WWE. Wrestling was really my first love up until about like 99 is when 98 is I started realizing, finding out it was fake. And this is right around the time MMA was kind of starting to grow. I know, as a kid, I was like a 10, I thought it was real. And so that was my first love. I grew up wanting to initially be a professional wrestler. And then MMA stole my heart for about 15 or 16 years. And so I had the WWE interest, our talent scout expressed and it brought me back into being interested in wrestling. So when I kind of started my bulletproof character in MMA, it's very professional wrestling derived from my childhood. I'm essentially a professional wrestling personality in MMA. And so getting back into wrestling, I really feel like it's helped my brain. It kind of reignited the love and passion for wrestling. Now I view it, like as a kid, I thought it was real fight. Like I believe I loved the kid. As a result of it being a kid, why I kind of try and keep it cage. Like when I beat people on the internet or things like that. I'm a huge wrestling fan. And like I said, MMA stole my heart for a while, but wrestling has found its way back into my heart. I think it'll be a big part of my life in the near future. I think I'll continue to get more and more involved in wrestling. I enjoy what it's all about, and now that I view it as going in a performance and a storytelling, I really enjoy that aspect of or showing the underdog story. I mean, it's a live performance. It's a live action movie, and the thing that originally finding out is like fake stuff. well, Iron Man's fake, and I love watching movies, you know, like that doesn't change my enjoyment of it, you know. Yeah, that's kind of been my tradition, you know. I've always been into combat sports. I've had an older brother, I've had younger brothers. We wrestled and we played, you know, like I've always been very physical, you know. I think it kind of went hand like we did, me and my brothers had wrestling matches and stuff, you know, and then I got older, I started having legit fight matches, you know, and now I'm back training for wrestling. It's been a fun little circle, and I think they two are so similar and related. That's been an easy transition for me, and I think both of them are helping each other because they're so. I think the personality stuff, character gimmick, entertainment, it's helping my fight side. And my fight training is going to help all my wrestling development in terms of.
Hey, Blake, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. It's kind of difficult to understand. Your connection's kind of weak. So I don't know if you want to log back in and log back out or figure that out. Your audio's breaking up. So while he's doing that, everybody else on the line here, did you all want to be performers in pro wrestling? The people who haven't answered, just a yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so you all wanted to be in the ring. So
Eventually, yeah, you know.
Oh, no, I did not. No way.
Not in the ring. Why not, John?
Oh, even as a little kid, I was very chubby by the time I was in 4th grade. I knew that athleticism was not going to be my strong point. So, and when you know, growing up as a fat kid in the early 90s, when bullying was still cool, if you guys remember that, you have to learn how to have a quick wit early on. So I knew right away. Like, I loved wrestling, but I knew that performing as an athlete, that was not going to be it for me.
In my favorite yearbook signature I ever got, my freshman yearbook, this girl, Alex, she wrote, "James, have a great summer. Good luck on your pro wrestling career." That's when I still thought I could be in the ring before athletic ability fully waved bye-bye to me. So,
all right. And Carl?
Yeah, no way. I even most recently was speaking to a friend that does a lot with Ohio Valley Wrestling, and as we're pulling back the curtain a little bit, I've had some run-ins with Robert Baines, and he's like, "Man, you got to learn how to bump. You really got to do it." And then he's like, "Actually, you know what? No, it'd be better if you didn't, you know, like, because you want to seem like the broadcaster doesn't, you know what he's doing, because you really don't know what you're doing." No, for me, it was, it's tough. Wrestling's always come out of pain in a more psychological life trauma type of stuff. Like, I fell in love with wrestling because it was an outlet. At 7 from my parents' divorce, I saw Lex Luger body slam Yokozuna on that ship, and I was hooked. And so from there, I was in, and then I kind of broke away from it until, as you mentioned at the beginning, I did get back into the reporting and anchoring kind of all over the nation. It's all over the place. I was in Las Vegas, and I had stumbled upon just a Facebook post from this girl, Rachel Kelso. I'm like, I have no idea who this is. She's talking about needing a kidney. Do a little bit more research, find out that she, in fact, was a wrestler for a promotion there in Las Vegas, but also for Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. And she was donating her kidney to her brother, who frankly didn't have many days left, and she was retiring. And I got into this ring to interview her, and it was like I was saturated with this feeling of, oh, I've missed this so much, and I don't even know what I missed, but it was like this intangible aura just consumed me and picked me back up. And so both times I've kind of gotten back in it, it's been things where it's escaping pain or showing somebody else's pain. And luckily Rachel triumphed through that, and from what I know is doing well today. But yeah, kind of two very odd ways of falling in love with it. And but no, I knew that I never wanted to bump, and I don't think I can. Not now, not even at 34. Maybe, I don't know. I'm all, You never know.
I don't know. Robert Baines is a bad influence. You never know what can happen. So, saying.
Ended up hypnotized, eyes spinning around. Yeah.
Yeah,
Doing a bunch of Hindu squats.
And when we resume production, I hope that we pick that up as well. And Andrew, so you were an in-ring talent. You're a behind-the-scenes guy. We've known each other for many years, but and obviously you got into wrestling because you wanted to get into wrestling. But like, you know, when you were a kid, did you really picture it in your head and like this is it?
Yeah. Funny enough, I had an affinity to be a ring announcer. That's what I really wanted to do when I was a small child. I wanted to be the Fink. I was a big fan of the Fink. And coming time in high school, I was going to high school with a local referee by the name of Aaron Hassan. Everybody knows Hassan. Some of you may remember this name. But his name is Aaron Hassan. And he actually got involved with a show. They let him referee and screw somebody over on a fast count. And I caught wind of him doing this. And I yelled at him and said, well, I'm going to do better. I'm going to go train and I'm actually going to wrestle. And then I think that's what the jealousy sparked me to actually try to be an in-ring talent. So at 17 years old, I went to wrestling school and I kind of fell in love with the performing side of it. And much like, some of my counterparts here, I was never necessarily athletic. So, it took me a good, 12 or 15 years to kind of realize that I probably shouldn't be running the ropes anymore. I'm just kind of ripping people off. But I've always been in love with the actual in-ring performance. There's a camaraderie that you get in professional wrestling that is very indescribable. There's a brotherhood in a way. And even though I don't know people, I know people. We speak a certain language and we shake hands a certain way. There is a great deal of brotherhood within that segment of life. And it's something that I've always been in love with.
Awesome. Now, Dan Joseph, I'll let you tell it, but you wanted to be a wrestler since you came out, right?
Everybody's had such great answers, and I'm just trying to figure out where to look this whole time. I had no idea. I watched wrestling when I was young, very young. Maybe stopped when I was about 6 or so, and I watched a little bit during the wars because everybody watched, during that time.
The Gulf War.
Yes. The what?
The Gulf War.
The Gulf Wars. That's when I was, Hulkamania was running wild.
That's right.
I did a lot of sports, footballs and hockey was mostly everything I did. And I missed that physicality, and I was starting to get older and I wanted to do something dumb before I got too old. So I thought, why not wrestling? And
because fly fishing isn't dumb.
No, yeah. I want to do something dumb that I can get hurt. That's what I want. Not,
You don't know this. He's a champion fly fisherman.
No, that's not true. That's not.
Yeah.
Do you have a belt for
really?
that?
Do you have a fly fishing desk set up at home for tying flies?
While he's making bread at home, he's sitting there, he's making flies.
It's not fly. My brother made the flies. It's not fly fishing. I was the New York State champion for bait casting accuracy, casting kids. I won that. I almost got a free college scholarship and stuff. I was apparently damn good at bait casting.
Wow.
I believe that from Dan, but clean shave and not so much.
Okay, wait. You have to have a trophy or a plaque or something.
I'm sure my parents do
a
have
ribbon,
a plaque.
a giant ribbon.
I won.
How convenient! It's still in Buffalo. The trophy's in Buffalo.
Everything's in Buffalo. It's all in Buffalo. You can't look it up online. This was way before the internet.
All right.
One second. I'd like to say that brings a whole new meaning to the real world champion.
And so, Todd, I'm not going to ask that question, Todd, because I think we all know your answer. You've been around our programming and professional wrestling at 20 years, if not a little bit over by now. And they all know that you are Hulkamania at heart. But I want to lead with this with you. So, and the rest of you can think of this as well. Your audition process. So not only have you were with me at UPW, we were together You're doing the commentary. I was doing production. And I have hired you many times over, and you've had other positions with Showtime, with MMA, with boxing, with MMA with me, boxing with me, Impact Wrestling, whatnot, New Japan Pro Wrestling. But do you have do you remember like our introduction and how you got sucked into my world of wrestling and how you can't shake me for the last 20 years?
I remember first meeting you back in the dingy, dark hallways of the Galaxy Theater in Santa Ana when you were, originally back there, part of UPW. And I worked my way into that. It was funny. It was a real baptism by fire for me because UPW at the time was a kind of unofficial WWF developmental system. So the first full show that I called had Samoa Joe versus Tommy Dreamer, Victoria versus Molly Holly, Edge and Christian against with Kazarian and Nova. And I called it with Schmo. And talk about getting thrown into the fire. And I cringe if I ever unearth that tape and listen back because it's me trying to do my best Joey Styles impression, and it's awful. But yeah, no, that I think that's where I first met you, was there, and then it just kind of snowballed. We did the Tokon Fighting Spirit, the New Japan USA stuff. I think I ring announced like the best of the Super Juniors when we did the stuff for that, and then that eventually transitioned into those Columbia Square. First the Wrestling Showcase, and then Columbia Square, and then on from there.
Yeah, for sure. When you were going over towards Impact or TNA Wrestling at the time, or even Showtime to do that stuff, is what you learned on the Hollywood program or the NWA programming, did it help you at all to secure those roles?
Oh no, definitely. And I had great tape with great talent in ring. It's one thing to have a good broadcast reel, but you're going to catch their eyes too if there's great in-ring talent that you're calling and telling their story. So I certainly had the benefit of that. I had Rick had done Valor Fighting, so I had some Valor Fighting stuff to turn in. But I do recall using some of the New Japan USA stuff for MMA because it was a very strong style MMA based style. So I didn't have a ton of MMA tape at the time, but I did have the New Japan stuff, which helped bolster that.
Sure. Hey, LaQuasto, so I wish Stu were here because you guys have a unique hiring story with us. But do you remember the audition or the introduction into the audition? I don't even think we had real auditions.
No, of course you didn't. You didn't audition me. No,
I think I want to tell you the truth. I think the video that I found of you were hosting on a CBS Sports set, and I said, we can use this to do some brand association.
Oh, well, yeah, that worked out. But no, I think it was Jeremy Schott who was working the camera on another project that I did. We started talking about wrestling, and a couple months later you called. And then apparently you had meetings with Stu and I back to back on the same day. It was at a Starbucks in the Valley. I forget where exactly. And then within 2 years, Stu was trying to choke me out and throw me off the stage. So it worked out.
Yeah. And so you've gone on. You had great opportunities after wrestling with us. What were the comparisons and the biggest differences between working with the WWE and our operation for so long?
When it comes down to it, Championship Wrestling, it is, wow, you talk about what a great 9 years it was. Because, I came in and essentially did everything, interviews for a number of years. And then I'll never forget that I think it was a Thursday night before a Sunday taping when you sent me a message, or maybe you called me and said, hey, you're doing commentary on Sunday. I said, why? And I believe Todd couldn't make it. And I forget, maybe it was Resnick at the time. And that was I never done it before, but it was something I always wanted to do. I just didn't want to push my way in. I just wanted to be patient. And so yeah, Championship Wrestling, it's good television. The way it's shot, it's almost, wrestling is wrestling, but when it's done right, it's fantastic. And that's the way Championship Wrestling was done. So I took every tool I had and was able to use it over the past year. Obviously, there's a different structure. There's a whole big learning process. And I learned a lot more about the science of matches over the last year, which is great. But at the same time, like so many great memories, so many tremendous moments, storytelling over the last 9+ years.
Yeah. And how about you, Grant? And the reason I'm going this way is because there's a historic piece trying to go from the oldest people on the show going forward. But Grant and I, we have a great affection for old comedy and puppeteering and animation and Disney parks and whatnot. And if you don't follow Grant, you're missing out because he's a great entertainer just in general. But growing up a wrestling fan, but also I knew bits and pieces about you just because we had a common friend, and we had a lot of same interests. So I knew that from an improv point of view and whatnot. I can't remember the first time I met Grant. I know it wasn't in a wrestling setting; it was more social. But I knew I wanted you on the show.
Well, I was thinking about this. It's actually very funny because our first meeting, I think our official meeting about me coming on was you had the idea for Howdy Price.
That's right.
And you had originally were considering me for Howdy Price. And I even went down to Mach 1, I think, down in Orange County to start some training. And I went down to watch, and then I was going to go back, and I had this kind of like little health thing where I passed out twice. And the doctor was like, yeah, maybe you should not be, you should not doing this. But anyway, then you kept me in mind. And then one day, I think Mike Coughlin approached me or texted me and said, hey, can you come this Sunday to the on La Brea? I don't remember the name.
Showcase Theater.
Showcase Theater. Can you come? And so, yeah, that was my first. And the very first thing I did was, and I always love this story, is my first interview was with a wrestler who will remain nameless. But moments before the interview that I was supposed to interview him, Adam Pearce just laid into him and was just like, you need to shape up. You need to do this. I need to believe you in these things. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, okay. All right, he goes, now y'all want to see some fire in this interview? And he's screaming like he's right here and the wrestler's right here and I'm in between. And then they're like, okay, go. And then Adam was just sitting just right off a frame. And so my very first time was a little nerve-wracking. And then I remember Mike Coughlin, after a couple things, sent me a picture of myself while I was interviewing. And he goes, could you look like you're having fun? Like you're enjoying this? And so that really helped. And I've had a blast ever since. It's been, it was a really fun time. I think I was there 5 or 6 years or something like that. Yeah. And it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, Grant, to your defense, my first ever interview was with Adam Pearce, and I was terrified.
Oh boy, that's a rough first interview, Costa.
Oh yeah.
And so people who might not know this, Adam Pearce at the time, not only was he the NWA World Champion, he was also the producer of the show and the head writer. So he was involved in all aspects. And as intimidating as he comes across on camera, that's him in real life. He's very passionate about wrestling, and he can be fun too. But when you're by those cameras and trying to get that performance out of you, he'll really get it out of you. And whether he scares the shit out of you to make you do it, the performance will be there. So Grant's right on top of it. I'd like to tell a quick story here too. And again, I don't want this to be too long, but there's so much fun stuff to talk about. So the Stars and why they're here, and why Mr. Kincaid is here, and why John Roberts, not why he's here in general, but why in this particular segment. I went into business with the Stars in Memphis, and it took us a very long time to convince a television station to work with us, their TV station, CW30. I want to say it was almost 2 years, or maybe even more. And if you folks don't know what we're talking about, we decided to test the Memphis market outside of our syndication. So how could we make a show more local and afford us a little more guaranteed advertising, and to see if it would work like a local show. So together, the three of us practically every day bugged the television station to get them to say yes. And now we've been on the air for a year, and it's a hell of a success, because off of Memphis, we now have Amarillo and we have San Francisco. But go ahead, Dustin, why don't you tell your side of it?
Well, I think we all wanted wrestling back in Memphis, and back in the classic days, that was, like I said earlier, it was like the professional sports team for Memphis was professional wrestling. And it's been roughly about 15 years before, since we've had a show here. And it was Corey Macklin that had the last rendition, and it was live. So I think we were one of the last live territories on Memphis television.
Right.
And Corey Macklin passed away in a car accident. Nobody was there to pick up the wrestling. So for about 15 years, people had talked about it, and they just couldn't make it happen. David found us on Facebook, reached out because we work with CW30, and of course, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood is on a ton of CW stations all across. So it really wasn't a matter of like if they wanted wrestling, it was which brand of wrestling. And if you shoot something like a lot of the local independent scenes just everywhere, I mean, they're in National Guard armies, or they're in high school gyms, or they just don't have the scenery. The stage is not there. It doesn't look like the professional quality that a CW30 would want to air on television in Memphis. So we pitched a couple of different ideas. Maria was with us 100% on it, but sometimes she would have to reel us back in, like, all right, so hey, wait a second. Sometimes they don't want to make the wrestling. Sometimes they just want to air the wrestling. And so we found a good medium. And since the success of the last 13 or 14 months, now we're talking about possibly recording the wrestling here in Memphis. And so it, just like wrestling from Arizona and just like Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, we would have our own brand here spun off of the United Wrestling Network.
Yeah, we're working on it real hard. And, talking about that, we have 3 people on here from the Bay Area. And it's very interesting. So out of everyone on here, Bimbo is I don't know him as well as I know the rest of you guys, because it's only been probably since the beginning of the year we've been working with him up there. But he has a hell of a history. He's with the Golden State Warriors. He's a broadcaster. He's a producer. He loves professional wrestling. But when you have the opportunity, and I'm going to ask the other 2 guys, Grant and John, both from the Bay Area, when you heard that you were going to be on KGO7 with a pro wrestling show, and again, guys who are watching this who don't understand necessarily broadcasting, KGO is owned by the Walt Disney Company. It's an ABC Disney station, and in television, that's a big deal. So. But go ahead, Jim. When we finally put the deal together and this is what we're going to do, what were your impressions?
I mean, I couldn't have been more thrilled and overjoyed that it was coming to the Bay Area, and the fact, like you said, that it was going to be on KGO ABC7. Like you said, just big deal. That is the name on the marquee for a reason, and I was just so happy to be a part of it. Like you said, I grew up a wrestling fan, and as Alex wrote in my yearbook, I always wanted to be a part of the show somehow. And like John, I've done some work for All Pro Wrestling up here in the Bay Area on commentary and everything like that. And it's just sort of funny how it came about. I left a training session with some young wrestlers, and I was on my way back to my house, and it was, like you said, near the start of the year. And I was like, boy, I really want to find another avenue to get even more involved in pro wrestling. And I kid you not, the next morning I woke up to a text from Levi Shapiro, who's obviously a competitor and my broadcast partner here in the Bay Area. And he was like, hey, I think I have an opportunity that you might be perfect for. I want to introduce you to David Marquez. And the rest was sort of history. And one thing that I am proud of with it being in the Bay Area is that we have the opportunity, and we got that deal to do it at San Francisco State until obviously the pandemic shut down. And for me, as an alum of San Francisco State University, they helped make my broadcast dream into a reality. So I was happy to sort of go back there and give back. And I think we turned into a pretty cool deal getting to do it at SF State. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. So John, again, growing up in the area, I know that you're a broadcast geek like I am. You know an awful lot, from reporters to weathermen to you name it. When you heard, and you're more around this than most, more of the inside because you work in the office. But, when I was saying to people, because I know folks didn't believe at all that this was going to be on an ABC owned and operated TV station. But like when you heard it, being a kid growing up in the area, Channel 7's always number 1.
Yeah, for me that was a huge deal. The day that you mentioned that was the direction we were going, and that it was a done deal, and that we were ready to announce. That was a huge like milestone moment, really in my life that I think about, because growing up I didn't have television for the most part. I listened to the radio a lot, to KNBR up there in the Bay Area. But once I did get access to television, I grew up watching ABC7 for local news and for national news. So that was always what I tuned into through my late adolescence into my teenage years, and even beyond, living in the Bay Area until my late 20s. So that was a huge deal, and I'm incredibly proud to be a part of the team that is on the air there. I grew up just north of San Francisco in a little town in North Marin called Novato, which most people, they hear that and they think Nevada. No, Novato. It's Novato, California. Where's that? Oh, north of San Francisco. Okay. So for us to be on the air there is a huge opportunity. And since we've been on the air there, I've heard from plenty of people that I went to high school with, even people that I went to elementary school with, contacting me and saying, hey, are you on this show on? Yes, that's me. And yes, that's this show. Please continue to watch it, because it's awesome that we're on the air in the area that I grew up, let alone on ABC7. That's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm not sitting here trying to toot our horns, but I am. But Grant, you too. You and I are virtually the same age. You're a TV geek like I am, broadcasting geek. You're unfortunately not on the show, and I'm hoping in time to get you back on there. But you know, on a channel like ABC7.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I was there. I think maybe we did a little a trial run on KOFY. Maybe
we did. We were on,
and which was TV 20. Which when I was growing up, they had TV 20's dance party. And when I was in high school, I was on that once. So to be broadcast in the Bay Area is just awesome, because I have family there. I have, you know, as John said, all the people I went to high school with and all that stuff. And it is very cool to be on TV in the Bay Area, but also to just be like, yeah, remember in high school, I was in the theater. Now I'm on TV. Yeah. Hey, look at that, everybody. And nobody really cares. But, you know, it is really cool to be on the air in your hometown. It really does mean a lot.
Gotcha. Now, I'm working hard for Nick Bonanno hasn't said anything, but he's from New York. So I'm working to get you on WABC there too.
Awesome.
He's running the gears right now. Okay, so let me get a better reaction. Channel 6 Philadelphia is on its way, Johnny.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. I'm sorry. I was waiting
There's
for Bonanno.
saucer eyes over there.
I was waiting for Bonanno to say more than one word with that mustache. It's very distracting, right? Oh no, that's fantastic. Philadelphia needs it. That's perfect.
So when we do that local version, whether we have to shoot it in Orlando, we'll ship it up to Channel 6.
Okie dokie.
All right. All right. All right. So, what's that? Someone broke up. I'm sorry about that.
Bonanno's in a bunker, I believe.
Yeah, Nick, quiet. Come on.
Which is
interrupting
weird, because I could just reach over there right now and like just push him. He's not far from me.
You didn't ask me a question. You didn't. I sometimes people in Florida saw me on TV, like my friend was there, and they said, "Hey, I've been watching this."
Hey, we can't hear you.
Wrestling show.
I mean,
hey, is it Bonanno? Hear you?
This is
Nick, your audio is not that great right now, pal.
This is production right
Actually,
here.
that's actually his voice. That's what his voice sounds like in real life.
Yeah, most don't know. Nick is a referee, and so because this is what referees sound like in the ring. Dan can attest to this.
That's his government voice with his government job.
I know, I feel like he's wearing the whole thing.
Is that anonymous?
Yeah.
So let's go into fun stuff. Why don't you guys? You can just go down the line. Just start with Jeremy and just tag all the way down. Do you have a favorite moment that you've experienced while being with us? It doesn't have to be on camera or a talent. It could be something that we've done. You can let the people in on something or an experience you've had, or I mean, because you come from the NBA as well. So I mean, how's all this work?
Yeah, it's a lot different than my 24 years with the Suns for sure, but I'm loving every minute of it. Got a chance to start out on commentary with John Roberts, who gave me a lot of advice and coaching along the way, and then got paired up with Dan. Dan, I think you need to put the belt over your shoulder while you're.
Oh, the belt. I mean, I don't have it just laying around. Oh, wait, this belt.
Yeah, there you go. That's better.
I didn't realize.
Ladies and gentlemen, the United Television champion, Dan Joseph.
There you go. There you go. And Dan and I work great together, so he's been a blast to work with. I think the most memorable thing for me was when I interviewed the Keepers of the Faith backstage, and Gallo just slowly pulled his chain off and wrapped it around my neck and started pulling, and I had no idea it was coming. So I'm trying to ask questions as I'm getting choked on air, which was interesting. But so that was probably the most unique situation. But I've just had a blast. Johnny has given me some great advice as well. And I got a chance to work with Carl and David. You've been a big help, so I really appreciate just being a part of all this.
Awesome. Okay, Jim.
I think to reiterate what I was saying a moment ago, probably the coolest thing for me is all those students that came in there, you know, and after we got a couple tapings, just watching them grow, you know, and they're not all necessarily wrestling fans, but they're getting this opportunity to have their work put on ABC 7, and they realize that. And to see them sort of light up and bring ideas to the table, and just, you know, when we came in for that second set of tapings, they were so really on it and just, you know, really engaged. That's been very fun for me to be honest. It makes me kind of want to go into teaching a little bit too. But it's definitely sort of helped stoke their professional fires as well. And so hopefully, you know, they might end up in pro wrestling for a protracted period of time as well. But I think that to me is the coolest thing. And I have to shout out just how supportive everyone at the Golden State Warriors has been. You know, when you released the press release and they saw it, they were all just so excited for me and just have been very supportive. So that's been pretty rad.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Dan Joseph.
I really didn't have any idea of about wrestling, like how it, you know, how it worked, how the show, any of that stuff.
Well, let me say this real quick. It's not like it's a favorite moment, but like when Dan was in wrestling school and coming through all this, and he was asking me like, "Oh, what should I watch? Or what should I do?" And I was like, "Oh, you know, this is Tommy Rich, and this is this, and this is that, whatever. Ricky Morton, whatever." I knew he can talk just because I have a conversation with him. He's a great conversation. He knows how to talk. So I said, "Why don't you look at this?" Because I know I'd never seen him before. I said, "Watch some Dusty Rhodes, watch some Terry Funk. Check this out." And so he watched him, and he pulled me aside, and he goes, "Hey, I watched those interviews." Like,
hey, come on now.
And he's like, "Why are they yelling so much? They're just yelling. Like, why? They're like angry, like yelling."
They were so mad. But no, I didn't know what wrestling was. So coming on the show then and seeing it grow from, you know, the Glendale, the red curtains everywhere, and then seeing it to what we have now. Like, I don't want to be like sappy, but that's kind of like that development and that growth has been like my favorite part of all this, just watching it blossom into this show. And then I'm a champion and stuff. So,
but how about in ring or anything? Like you're in the mix with the guys. It's and even backstage, it's just, you know, you're a part of it on different levels. Like, is there anything that stands out? You're on road trips. Like, what?
Yeah, road trips are fun. We've had trips going to Arizona. The rookie ran out of gas on us.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know if he didn't want to pull over, if he just thought he wanted to make good time or something. But we're in the middle of Arizona. We ran out of gas. Like, awesome. It's not the desert. This is great.
But how about all those times traveling with Joe Galley since he's not here?
I never.
You really were never in the car with Joe Galley?
I mean, maybe I was in the van with him once, maybe, but you guys leave so early on Friday. I have, you know, children and stuff, so I'm staying home. I got to bounce early Saturday morning, so I'm taking the late train up.
Yeah, I mean,
Joe Galley is an excellent traveling companion.
Yes, he is. I've heard about this. I've heard about the Arizona traveling.
Right in the car.
Oh, Nick, are you?
Nick's robot voice. Come on. Malfunction.
Nick, do you want to talk about the van?
Oh, God, look at that. Flat tire. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, he's gonna get mad in a second. This is gonna be great.
Oh no, we
No,
can't
but
hear
I
him.
mean, Emily,
No, go ahead.
it's no secret that Brandon and Joe are best friends.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like what's great about Arizona, and I know there's actually a lot of people that travel to Hollywood too, that there's always like some type of camaraderie and family that like everyone comes together to like, we have this show on a Saturday or on a Sunday, and sorry, my cat's meowing. And everyone just goes in, like whether you're a wrestler or whether you're on commentary or whether you're backstage, like everyone is like, you know what, I'm gonna do this show because it means something, and so all the passion is there. And even in the van to Arizona, there's lots of wrestling talk, and because everyone loves it, and it shows when we produce a show and people get to see it and enjoy it.
All right, Mandic.
Okay. By far my favorite. Yikes.
My rights here.
By far my favorite moment ever was nervously pacing the Desert Diamond Casino in Tucson. You told me what the call time was for my first ever show, and I got there like 2.5 hours early. And in more than a decade in news, I've never wanted to throw up. I was so nervous, and you guys at least just quelled and iced all my fears of what that first experience is like. But I will go back to my first interview, that being Mike Knox, and it's so tangible of you just like leading me. It felt like by the hand, and you're like, here we go, you're going to interview Mike Knox, and I'm like, I didn't even have words. I was so focused on shaking hands and etiquette and keeping traditions alive. Wait, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. It's just Mike joke. Go ahead.
No. Yeah, no, I was so focused on etiquette and all that I forgot what I was there to do. And I get up to him and you're like, Mike, Carl, and I'm like, he's like, hey brother, you're gonna have to pull me through this one. You have to pull me through this promo. I'm like, I've never done this. I don't know what he's like, where are we going with this? I'm like, I don't know. And I'm trying to like, and I'm trying to look around. I'm like, I was completely, but it was the best learning tool ever of getting that trial by fire. Going off of what Emily said, I love the fact that with Arizona, getting to wear multiple hats, and I see it as a pie chart. I love the fact that I get to interview and ask actual questions, and then actually pick the brains of the people in the back and watch people interact. And I'm big to just sit back and watch and be a sponge, because I don't feel like I have to lend my advice or this or that. I want to learn, and I've always.
You should learn to take a bump then.
Well, all right, yeah, then fine, I'll do that.
I'm ready to go talk to Baines. He'll be there.
I love the pie chart mentality. I mean, that's what I see in my brain of like, all right, a little bit, we're going to be doing some interviews, a little bit, watch guys react, a little bit, watch fans react, a little bit, listen to how the play-by-play and color goes back and forth. And to get all of that into one day is there. You can't put a price tag on that.
All right. Okay, stars.
First of all, man, shout out to the NBA. The Suns, the Grizzlies, and the Warriors.
That's right.
That's awesome, man. That's one of the most fun things, but I think Maria has a memory.
So we do a lot of silly things in studio just to keep our Memphis audience engaged. And so we've smashed cakes in Dustin's face. We've done a lot of crazy things on there, but I think our favorite would have been flying to Hollywood and being a surprise entrant in the Royal Rumble, of course.
Yes.
Awesome. Todd Kennedy. Todd came with the call on that was really, really cool. And then also just being there. And the first time, that was actually, believe it or not, first time we ever met Dave.
Yeah.
So we're business partners and such, but we never met face to face in person. So meeting him there, and just like meeting everybody else, almost everybody in the room here, just about. But that was in itself was just a great experience. But also, Dave, you know this, just sitting at the desk the first time growing up watching Lance Russell and Dave Brown, that was like the ultimate bucket list for me. And anybody that doesn't know Lance Russell and Dave Brown, you've got to Google it and go watch some Memphis wrestling. And then also to be able to work with Dave, because Dave is a spokesperson on the show. We actually had him here today recording commercials, just to be able to work with the guys that you grew up basically idolizing. So, but yeah, that's a lot of memories.
Good. Okay, Johnny.
Oh, actually, I have so many. I'll defer to Todd first. I don't want to take any of Todd's, just in case him and I have.
We'll go the other direction then. Todd.
Okay, yeah, no problem. I piggyback on what Emily said. I think just that family dynamic. I go back, guys like Johnny, we were there since the beginning, so we got to kind of experience each other's journeys and the different places we got to go and the different places that our experience with Hollywood took us. A couple things that stand out for me, I think, calling Pierce and Cabana in 2011 for the NWA World's Heavyweight title, calling an NWA World's Heavyweight title change and having it be in such a great atmosphere. And Mongoose was there handing out milk because Cabana had promised to buy everybody a drink if he won. It was just such a magical moment. I think a real highlight in our decade plus. But just everybody I've gotten to work with, like Johnny, I mentioned, Stu, working with like Andrew Jasic, and Stu gave me that kind of Gorilla Bobby dynamic, which was fun. But I'm not caught off guard too often. And I remember working with Dan Joseph. I think it was one of the first times we worked together. It was so funny. Producers in our ear. All right, we're going to break in 5, 4, 3. Dan's talking at the time, and he goes, "All right, we got to take a break. Hey, Todd, why don't you tell him all about that?" I'm like, we got to take a break? Why did you just send it to break? It was so genuine and so hilarious. And we were laughing through the whole break. And then I remember just, by the way, looking at Dan, I'm afraid that Pac 3 is going to come back, taking a look at that shave job. But one other time that really cracked me up on commentary was there's some sort of a battle royal, and Percy Pringle, for some reason, was on commentary. His man Ricker was in the match. And I remember he was just on Willie Mack the whole time on commentary, just saying, "He's not a wrestler. He's a boxer. He's a boxer. He doesn't belong in the wrestling ring. He's a boxer." And I'm trying to call the action. "Hey, Mike, he's a boxer." And then the funniest thing was they did, the end was, I think it was Ricker and Willie, where they both kind of went out and touched at the same time, and who won and who hit first. And it was Ricker. Ricker hit first. Didn't he? It was Ricker. Well, you don't want to hit first when you're getting thrown out of a battle royal. He's Ricker hit first. Say it. I think that's when he got into it with Johnny, and I mean, it was chaotic, but that was super fun. And now working with so many styles of people, working now with Blake, who's bona fide heavyweight contender. So having that kind of sports analyst style in there that can really break down the striking and the grappling. I've had the pleasure of working with so many great talents in my time in United, and helps iron sharpens iron. It helps me be a better performer too.
All right, Robert.
For me, growing up, once I found pro wrestling, I wanted to be a pro wrestler. But before that, I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. So getting to be involved in a very successful pro wrestling television show as a broadcaster in amongst itself is a huge bullet point for me. But one of the big things for me in my career with the United Wrestling Network was actually my audition process. David had reached out to me and said, "Hey, Grant Pachoko's leaving the show. We have an opening for a backstage interviewer. Would you like to come audition?" And I said yes, and came down. I drove down from the Bay Area with the Classic Connection with Levi Shapiro and Buddy Royal and Zicky Dice, current NWA television champion. And that day also happened to be the day that David Arquette was wrestling RJ City in his return to the ring. For my audition, it kind of seemed like David auditioned for it because a couple people weren't aware that I was showing up to do backstage interviews. So when it came time to do it, I did it with the Classic Connection for my audition. Went well, and then with Zicky Dice. Little did I know that Nick Bonanno, from what I'm told, had told Zicky to mess with me. And so I go, ladies and gentlemen, I'm standing here with Zicky Dice, and next thing I know, Zicky is right here in my face screaming at me. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. This is what we're doing. Finish that, and then about 5 minutes later, I get pulled aside. What's up?
I said, see, that's the first way of producing.
You know, I give Nick credit. He won't give up. He will not.
Still going. He's still going.
But to finish that story,
continue.
Noel Marquez pulled me aside a couple minutes later, and after that, and he said, "Hey, you did a great job. We have one more thing for you."
Mentality.
Oh boy, we have one more thing for you. And I was like, "What's that?" He goes, "You're going to interview David Arquette." And I was like, "Okay, cool." He's like, "Just do it." And that happened, and that was a pretty cool moment. It never made air, but it was still a pretty cool moment to get to be there with a bona fide Hollywood star for my audition to be on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. So that was pretty cool.
All right. Hey, Andrew, so people might not know this. You were a competitor on the show in a tag team, Anchors Away, and then you went away, and then you came back as a broadcaster. So between whether it be in-ring, goofiness, wrestling, junk, or dumb broadcasting that I just kind of threw you in, what are your memories?
Wrestling junk. That's I remember. It's funny because when we were brought into Championship Wrestling, we had never been good guys before. We were always really mean-spirited people. We were known for being, real jerks. But in addition to that, we did a lot of comedic humor in the ring. So when we were brought in to be good guys, this patriotic American flag waving team, I had it in the back of my head the entire time. I was like, this isn't going to work. People are going to turn on me. They're going to feel like I felt about Lex Luger in the 90s. And I remember there was an instance where my partner, Trevor, he couldn't make a show. So we had to do something where he just wasn't involved in a match. And at the time we were feuding with, I want to say it was Tito and Rico. And so it was going to be a 2-on-1, me versus them, obviously. And they were trying to decide of things to do. And all I could think of was like, well, Anchors Away would do this, 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 and this. And we went out and had like a 7-minute match. It's funny because I was interviewed before the match by, I want to say it was Johnny LaQuasto. The match was called by Stu Stone and Todd Kennelly, which is kind of like, bringing everything kind of full circle, which is kind of funny. But anyway, we did the match, and I was able to see from a good guy's perspective of how ridiculous that team looks when doing the Anchors Away stuff, which to me was so delightful to see, because you could look at yourself on tape or whatever, and you always have this different perception of yourself than everybody else has. But to be able to see a team do it in front of me was just so magical in the most ridiculous way. So that's probably my favorite moment at Championship Wrestling.
Okay, LaQuasto, now you're up.
Wow. I'm just going to go through obviously everything Todd said and, all the great memories we had, but I have a list of just, to me, as iconic as it gets as far as Championship Wrestling. Speaking of Percy, to piggyback off that, is shortly after Percy passed away, we had the Red Carpet Rumble. I think that maybe the loudest I've ever heard our live audience was when Ricker made his entrance at number 1 for the Red Carpet Rumble. And not only that, he goes on to win the thing and then has the match that never happened with Scorpio Sky. Only the people that were there live saw it, and it was amazing because they're two of the absolute best, but it was never broadcast. So that was an amazing memory. Bad Dude Tito ending Avalon's 672-day reign in about 27 seconds was just so impactful, and I give them both a lot of credit. Vermin holding all the titles up at once. I'll never forget watching that. And also, as far as commentary, I think my favorite memory was I don't know where Todd was at the time. He may have been gone at that point, or maybe he was just missing. It was Stu and I calling a match, and Stu was feuding with Willie Mack. And it was during a match where the Hobo was trying to become #1 contender. Willie chases Stu away from the announce desk, around the ring, and out of the whole venue. And I had to call like the last 2 minutes solo. Hobo wins. And it was such like Hobo had such a unique, organic babyface reaction by the audience. And people were genuinely so happy to see him win. It was really great to be able to call that for him. That was cool.
All right. Now, something I want to ask you, Johnny, not to keep everything on hold. Your time in the WWE, working with people who were with us on our broadcast, and then was also working with you there. Just the dynamic and seeing how that whole operation works. Are there a lot of similarities?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of similarities. When it comes down to it, a lot of stuff is last minute. A lot of stuff is last second. You don't have a lot of time to prepare, whether you are a wrestler superstar doing an interview or you're the person interviewing. A lot of stuff changes on the fly. I mean, even on the headset, there's stuff that happens that, well, that's not on the sheet, but okay, here we go. So it's all wrestling when it comes down to it. So the one thing I would preach to anyone on Championship Wrestling still, whether it's backstage or competing in the ring, is get every bit you can from it. Take it as seriously as possible, because you can utilize everything no matter where you go.
But just even think about this. So it's like whether you're in the pre-production meeting or actually doing a broadcast, you may have Adam Pearce in your ear as a producer, which you've experienced before. You may toss to Kathy Campanelli, whose name was Kat Marino, or you might toss over to Kathy Kelly, and then Drew Gulak might be wrestling in the ring. So
that happened, actually. Pierce was in my ear quite a bit, and there was also an on-cam where I pitched to a interview with Kat Marino. So, Kat and I are still very close. We're both down here in Florida, and yeah, I mean, very surreal stuff. But I owe everything to Championship Wrestling, so that's for sure.
Well, thank you. I wasn't looking for that, but thank you. Okay, Blake, since we're going to lose the light with you, and I know you're quite possibly the newest member of this whole thing. But I know you watched the show a little bit before you joined, and now being there, maybe the question for you is, who's your just favorite to watch?
My favorite to watch right now, I'm a big fan of tag teams that are able to have a good cohesive, it's not two guys out there in a match, but two guys that are a team. So I'm a huge fan of tag teams. I would say Wolf Zaddies right now are probably my favorite guys to watch get in there. Tito's got the grappling background too, and so I like watching big mean bruisers go in there and toss dudes around, man. And that's what the Wolf Zaddies do. So I'd probably say the Wolf Zaddies are my favorite United Wrestling Network group of guys right now.
Who's your favorite singles competitor?
Definitely Dan Jones, without a doubt.
Just wondering.
And Grant had, I think, has an advantage here, because much like Todd and Johnny, they were around when we kind of had a revolving door of lots of people going in and out. So Grant, for lack of a better term, was our Gene Okerlund, and he talked to everybody. So you have to have tons, because he's, if you ever did backstage interviews, the pre-tape stuff, there are outtakes and outtakes and outtakes and producing, and someone sticking their fingers in and, no, say it like this, or I might be across the room and I hear something and I'm like, no, say it like this. And they're like, oh, fuck Dave, you don't have to do it like that. Do it like this. So what about you, Grant?
Yeah, I mean, the backstage promos were a little nerve-wracking for me, because I always felt like, don't mess this up. Don't mess this up. And a lot of times when whoever the talent was, when they would finish what they were saying, I just wouldn't say anything. Like, even if I had to throw it to the ring, because I go, I'm going to mess this up. Because I remember one time when we were in Glendale, I think I was interviewing Joey Ryan maybe, but I called him Johnny Goodtime at the very end. He does this big long promo, and I go, there you go, Johnny Goodtime. And he was like, and everyone's like, what are you doing? I was like, ugh. But it was a lot of fun. It was always great. Yeah, I always just had a great time. It was, a lot of fun memories getting to talk to everybody. And the other thing I wanted to bring up, one of my favorite things was getting to do these Phil Singer Games cards. We were the first, I say we, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood was the first indie fed to get these game cards. There's Dan Joseph.
I can go run. I got all the pack.
No,
with
it's all right.
pack
It's all right.
three.
You don't need to. It's okay.
Is
But
there a
getting to do those
Footloose version?
cards was a lot of fun. And we're still making kind of bootleg cards now on. And definitely in ring, getting to sort of live my sort of manager fantasies with Dan Joseph and Todd Chandler as Footloose at the urging of Stu Stone, who was just like, just go out there, just go out there. And that was so much fun. But I think my favorite memory, and this happened in 2 instances, was when Sean Ricker won a casket match. And I think it was I don't know, and he stole, no. Ryan Taylor won the PP3 Cup, I believe. The first one, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Percy stole it because he was like, no, this has to go to Sean. This has to go to my thing. And there was a little girl in the crowd who was screaming at Percy and just and I just loved it because it was so believable to her. And I was like, that was me. That was me when I was little. And another time there was a group of kids at the Ocean View Pavilion who I forget exactly what was happening, but one of the bad guys did something really dastardly. And these kids were just screaming at the top of their lungs. And to me, that's why this is so fun. And this is so much fun to do, is to see those people who just believe it 100% and they're just 100% there, because that was me.
Yep.
Awesome.
Grant, recently I've been digging through some of the archive stuff, and it's funny that you mentioned Todd Chandler and Dan Joseph Footloose, because I randomly stumbled across the footage of the day that Todd Chandler turned on Dan Joseph, and your reaction. Why did you break up the greatest tag team ever? It was fantastic. Your reaction. You were so heartbroken to see Footloose disband forever. It was amazing.
I still am.
I try not to get involved in the conversation, but I'm going to, because there are way too many memories that I've forgotten. But my first is actually the first time I got to work with Peter Avalon we were at the Galaxy, and when we gave him the moniker of the biggest man in pro wrestling, he was having such a hard time because he was so young, so new, and I just threw him in there. I don't even think he knew that Colt Cabana was going to be his first opponent. And in going into the series, I felt we needed someone to build the show around for longevity. In my mind, it was like, well, Pierce is going to be around, but he's older. He's probably going to move on, another situation, get tired of this, which he eventually did, and now he's a producer for the WWE. So I figured I was going to create my Erica Kane story from all my children. I was going to have my young talent, and as long as the program goes, and hopefully there's longevity with the program, this is going to be my focal point, the beacon of the program to always get back to. And seeing Scared, and for the people who were there doing those interviews, it was not easy. And it was, back then I was a different person too. So a lot more adult words, a lot more being upset, a lot of red faces, a lot of high blood pressure. It was a different time. Behind the scenes too, because there was a lot going on in the NWA, which eventually led to what it led to. But I had a lot going on. And it's funny, Dustin, you say that, Memphis Wrestling was one of the last in-studio wrestling shows on broadcast, which is true in the United States. Championship Wrestling from Hollywood was actually the first TV station, a wrestling show, local show, to go back on to a full power TV station in a full-time basis here in Los Angeles on KDOC TV. So Peter, watching his story going all the way through, and every beat that we've created with Peter, and the guys who are in the meetings will probably remember me always focusing back on Peter. It's like, no, this has to go back to him. I think we made him a dual champion at one time, and being the valiant champion that he is, he surrenders one of them to just defend one the best he can, blah, 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 going all the way towards the end with Nico and The Office, and now he's the librarian. So to me, that's a great, fulfilling story that took 10 years practically to tell. and it worked. And the other memories that I have are just the behind the scenes craziness that you people don't see. We had a producer on the program who's a dear friend to most of us who has passed, Joe Franciosi, and we knew him as Joe Schmo. And you may hear his name every now and again come up. Joe was an amazing person in every regard. You would never, if you just hear stories about this guy, you would think that we were making it up. He was everything that you hear about when it comes to Joe Schmo.
Maniac.
And what was that?
He's a maniac.
A complete maniac. And you viewers right now, if you ever saw the segments that John Lovitz did in the WWE on Raw, I don't know what year it would have been, but there's a very memorable moment where a fan comes out of the stands and takes his eye out for money. That's Joe Schmo. So that just shows Joe 10,000% of the ridiculousness that we would put together. We were physical with each other. We were brothers in the truest definition. We fist fought with each other. It was a very intense marriage for a very long time. Todd brought him up earlier as his co-host on his first match he ever called. So the three of us were with each other a very long time, but I'm sure everybody has Schmo stories. If you want to share one, you're welcome to, because Schmo was just Todd.
I mean, he was a human cartoon, man. You got it. It was just, he was crazy. He's always in a sleeveless T-shirt, and but he was a genius at times as well. He was never a dull moment with Schmo, and we'll certainly never forget him. I know he got into it with you sometimes. I remember one time where he got into it with the Scrap Daddy backstage, and that was pretty crazy. But he really did love the business, and he really loved the talent and tried to come up with great ideas for the talent, and truly just emotionally was invested in the talent and wanted to work hard to help get them over and elevate their careers.
And to anyone who's wondering why Schmo would step up to Scrap Iron Adam Pearce, it's because Schmo actually couldn't see how big Pearce was. Literally, could not see.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
I have a Schmo question for those that knew him, because I never had the pleasure of knowing him. But it seems like every image, whether it's a still or video that I see of him, he's always wearing a Cookie Monster shirt. Was that like it? Did he have like 5 different versions of it that he just wore all the time?
He had one.
Okay.
And I just recently saw his son wearing that same shirt on Facebook.
I remember I interviewed Hobo in the shower because Schmo told me to do that. That's what we're doing this time. And then I also remember we filmed a segment where Heather Lynn slapped me, and it was a legit slap in the face. And then Joe just kept going, yeah, we didn't quite get it. Because after she slapped me, they went out in the hallway and did this big whole thing. And they kept coming back in and go, we didn't quite get it. We have to do it again. So whenever I think of Joe, I think of getting slapped in the face by Heather Lynn repeatedly.
No, Joe is ridiculous. His fingerprint is still all over the program. And he really created a really good heartbeat with Angelo and Johnny Yuma too, where they were so I was so far into pro wrestling and how to produce a show and the fundamentals of it, and going back even into the kayfabe pieces of it. But Schmo wanted to kill all that immediately, and the underdog. If you watch the Adam Pearce, this is a memory that I hate, and it's 100% Joe Schmo. I made the biggest deal that when Cabana was winning this title and the milk was coming out, that everybody treat this like the World Series. This is the biggest thing we can do, the biggest anything. And unbeknownst to me, Schmo, who was a writer on the program and a producer, David Lagana was there at the time too. I'm in there trying to do my best interview. This is the greatest thing ever. Here we go. You're the world's champion. And in front of me, there's a guy by the name of Sexy Chino, who you may or may not know, really, really thin Asian. just a wiry cartoon character in himself. But Schmo instructed him, because his gimmick was he was just like this dancing thing, the dancing fool. He just wouldn't stop dancing. And so I'm trying to do this interview, and Schmo had him go right in front of the hard cam, in front of me and Cabana. And you can see me like, get him out of the fucking way, get him out of the way, get him out of the way. And every camera we went to, there was Sexy Chino doing his dance. And I could hear Schmo behind the curtain just because he had this laugh that went like, and I could hear him through. I was like,
it's like the Cookie Monster.
Bitch. What's that?
It sounds like the Cookie Monster.
Yeah. So that's Joe. His fingers are all over everything. He was always under the influence. It's the wrestling that you don't hear about today. And so many stars on the program are there because of Joe. And the other person would be John Ian, who also passed away. He a huge part of our show and always the underdogs. And here I am, like, we're going to do something with Sean Spears and Sean Ricker and Brian Cage in that pro wrestling sense. And then I have Sexy Chino and who knows where else, which should be below the undercard. And Schmo's pushing them, the nobodies. And I'm looking at these guys like, what? We're going to invest TV time in these guys? Why? You'll find out. Well, I don't want to find out. Tell me what we're doing. I mentioned the fist fight. I used to direct the show, and so I'm sitting there directing, and he created a tag team tournament. That was the worst. I think one of the worst things we ever produced. The Summer Tag Team Classic or something.
Oh my, the scoring on that.
Yeah,
Nothing.
there were points. It was so messed up. Angelo had a big hand in that too. It was messed up. And all I remember is I'm directing, and none of this is making sense. And every time I go to turn, there's usually a producer who is in charge of the segment with you, and Schmo wrote the majority of it. And so every time I would turn, I say, I don't understand this. He got tired of me saying that, and he disappeared, and he went and got high. And so he came back, and I said to him, this is horrible. What am I supposed to do with this? And Schmo looked at me with his one eye and went, don't air it. I went ballistic so much that someone else, maybe Mongoose, took over directing, and we physically went outside in the hallway. You've all been in the Ocean View Pavilion where the entry is, where the window's at, and I straight socked Joe. One of the only people I've ever punched, and I punched the shit out of him. I was so mad. And then, we went on and everything was fine. but yeah, Schmo's a great guy.
I would order that on pay-per-view.
Speaking of funny segments, I have a question for Grant. I would like to know what it was like being the third man in the ring for the first ever Ray and Peter Entertainment Spectacular.
Another Schmo thing.
I didn't know what was going to happen, but I just went along with it. I mean, it was a lot of fun. Those two, I had a lot of fun interviews with both Ray and Peter throughout the time. And I think there was even a couple times where I got more comfortable working with him, where I even gave him a little bit back, in the interviews. But yeah, I mean, putting the fanny pack on me and putting the beard on me, it was hilarious.
Yeah, there was a lot of fun back then. There's a lot of fun now too. It's just that I'm older and I look at it like it's exhausting to go through those shows. I mean, and Grant, in the early days, they'll tell you we were doing 5 hours of taping in the early days. I mean, now we're doing 2 hours every 2 weeks. But way back then, we didn't have the resources, we didn't have the buildings. The rent, just to rent these venues, were $5,000-$6,000 before the lights, before the talent, and I had to get as much footage as I could back then. So we were stuck in there, and it was exhausting. It was fun, but way exhausting. So to try to wrap this up here, if there's a legacy with this program, let's say we're canceled, all of our 132 affiliates tell us to go away, COVID eats us up, or we get blown up here, unfortunately, in the next, by the end of the year, and the show's over and we're done. Is there a legacy with the United Wrestling Network, National Wrestling Alliance included, those years or anything? And if you want to go down the line, you're welcome to, starting with Jeremy.
Well, I'm still probably the rookie of the broadcast group here, so I'm not sure I'm the one who should start us out. But obviously there is a legacy. Just looking at all of the content that John is starting to pull together, and Logan is editing for our social media channels. It's pretty impressive what you guys have done for the wrestling industry as a whole. And just looking at the group of people here, and some of those that couldn't make it, the Joe Galleys and Kathy Kellys and others. Obviously, you've really left your fingerprints on a lot of people and a lot of fans over the years, Dave.
Well, thanks. I mean, there's a lot of people involved in that. It's not just me. There's a whole lot of folks. Go ahead, Jim.
I mean, to echo Jeremy, both in being a rookie and just looking at, the fact that so many people have gone on and are all over the place, whether it be in wrestling or other avenues of TV and entertainment. And the cool thing about wrestling, if the United Wrestling Network were to end tomorrow, the legacy still is that there's a blueprint for somebody else to pick up that baton and run with it. Just like Dustin was talking about how, Memphis has been dying for wrestling to come back. And, so I'm sure if this all ended, people would be like, boy, I sure miss that championship wrestling from Hollywood. And they would take that blueprint and run with it as well. And that's one of the really cool things.
Well, I don't want to, this isn't a trick question or anything. And if the answer is no, that's fine. Jeremy and Jim, did you guys watch the Hollywood show before you became a part of it? Or know about it?
Yes.
I did not. It didn't air here in Arizona at the time. It does now. But no, my son and I both are big wrestling fans, and he wanted to go see a local show. And I heard I'm friends with Justin Roberts, and I heard he was involved in a show out in Mesa. So I took him out one day, and that's how we were introduced to all of this about 4 years ago.
Yeah, I was definitely aware of it, and would catch it on YouTube and everything like that. And so when I didn't have any idea though that it was coming to the Bay Area until we talked, and then it was like the next day we're on ABC7. So that was a pretty cool deal.
All right, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's neat to be a part of all this. Obviously, I'm like watching with my grandfather growing up and stuff. So just it's fun, and I'm having a great time, and to be tied into the NWA and all the history there, and just like you said with you guys, the history of the show itself. It's been going on for 10 years now, Dave. Whatever
this broadcast.
We're on 11 now or whatever. Like it's awesome. It's more than I thought I'd be doing, and I'm having a blast doing it. So it's been really real fun.
Now, Emily, your story again is different. I mean, Brandon was there from the very beginning too.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of had this amazing kind of transition and journey that I've watched all of you guys over the years, and I've watched as a fan. So I started as a fan. I started as a partner watching someone in the ring, and and I always loved that you guys put storytelling, and you had creativity, and you had innovation towards these broadcasts. And that's what I think is, say it doesn't continue, which it's going to. We have great things, planned, but you guys are going to pass on that creativity, that storytelling, that innovation, and that passion towards all these other people that you've inspired. Like, I've watched it for years, and you guys inspired me to get back into what I love to do. And that's part of why we all do what we do, is to inspire and connect people. So that's what means so much to me, to be a part of all of this, and watch everyone grow and move on to different things and continue, producing really great stuff.
All right. Well, thanks. Now, Nick, I hope we can hear you. That works. All right. Go ahead, Carl.
I'm going to keep it short and simple. If my Wikipedia page had to go up tomorrow and I was gone, just poof, off the face of the earth, you couldn't write, and I'm pretty sure this is true for every single face I'm looking at here. You couldn't write my life story without including my involvement in the United Wrestling Network, whether it be in Hollywood, Arizona, and to me, there's no real words I can put around it, because I was a lump of clay that fell into your lap, and I continued to get molded. I don't know. I can't think of anything more fortunate for one to fall into. And I once this ban lifts, and hopefully we get out. I just can't wait to see the enthusiasm. I'm getting a little emotional. Just the drive that we're all going to have once we hit the airwaves.
Awesome. All right, Dustin. I know you were watching it from afar too before you came along.
Oh, are you kidding me? I think I went back and binge watched as much as I possibly could before our premiere. Man, but I've been around 13, 14 months now, and have just, like osmosis, have just picked up on the characters and some of the stories, even from when I wasn't there. But absolutely, it has a legacy, even just based off the last 14 months. I see a big legacy. I mean, you got NWA champions, you've had mask versus title, bull rope matches. It's been crazy, man. I love it.
See, sometimes it's hard for me to wrap my head around all that stuff, because there's I see the bottom line usually anymore. I'm not necessarily involved in the direct production of the show like I used to be. So, or even the directing of the talent and helping with the characters moving along, or the storylines moving along. So there's other people that I've given that work to, and I'm happy with what everybody's doing. Unfortunately, my job now is a boss, and I have to look at checkbooks, and I have to look at all that other stuff. And so it's not as fun anymore, and it kind of takes me out of the magic of what everybody here is enjoying. All right, Todd, how about you?
I think there's a legacy for sure. I think the recent piece that was put together, the What is the United Wrestling Network, with you speaking on that and showing the different talent that's come through there is a very powerful piece. A couple things, I was really proud, more recently with Coastline Clash at the Improv and finally getting that done. And the fact that we have an entertainment company like Levity Live that, once things return to normal, wants to look to United and Championship Wrestling from Hollywood at live event business at their different clubs. I think that's a huge compliment. And I just remember being in the ring with Dan Joseph to do those openings. And, it's pro wrestling cliche as, oh, it's deafening in here. But it really was, because we didn't have cans on, and we didn't, we weren't in each other's ears, and we really couldn't hear each other speak. But on top of that, I think the most gratifying thing is just the whole story arc of the NWA and how it all came full circle. And I know this is very important and emotional to you, because Columbia Square and Blue Demon Jr. is a champion, and Pierce and the Galaxy and Showcase Theater, Glendale Studios, Pierce and Cabana. I mean, we were the arena shows like the Orleans. I mean, we had some big things going and great momentum. And then for the NWA management at the time to make the decisions that they did, it ended up, in hindsight, being a good thing, because now we have the best of both worlds. Now that forced us to have a United Wrestling Network. It forced us to have a Hollywood Heritage champion. But when the NWA came back around, and I remember, I think it was the first 10 pounds of gold, and the 10 pounds of gold came back to the Ocean View Pavilion. And I think there was that moment where you looked at it and you were just like, that's pretty cool. And the fact that Johnny and I, who had been around for Pierce and Cabana and all that, were on the call of that first Aldis Tim Storm match for the title, along with Joe Galley, who's now the lead broadcaster for the NWA. It was kind of, past and present and everything coming together, and it really tied it up in a nice bow. And it was a long time coming, deservingly so. And now your involvement, of course, with them. And I just think that was just, you can't write a better story than that over the years.
Well, thanks. It's interesting too when you bring in the NWA piece to this, because there are days where, again, this isn't evil to say this, it's just there are days when I look at what we've done with the NWA in the limited time that we've been doing it, and it gets the maximum praise that's out there. And our show's been on the air for 10 plus years, and the origin of that program is our program. And although our programming and video and whatnot is on the show, fans don't necessarily associate it. So there are times I'll sit there and scratch my head and be like, well, I don't know how this isn't obvious. Not that I'm looking for accolades or anything like that. Just like, why isn't that reaching? Why isn't that hitting? And I don't know if I'll ever have the answer to that. But the other piece of the NWA for me, since you brought it up, is just my history with Harley Race and Gordon Soley. And that's really why I championed the NWA so much over the years and was one of its loudest cheerleaders for a long time. And on our broadcast, even if we want to talk about memories or whatnot, just the whole China experience and being the first broadcast ever to originate from China in North America from a pro wrestling standpoint, just getting that show made, that 3 years into creating that 1 hour that they allowed us to bring back. And the only thing in my head while we were doing it was I was even going to approach the then ownership, which we do not get along, of how I can take the NWA World Title to China, because I made that promise to Harley Race way back when. He told me there's only 2 places this title's never been, and that's Russia and Red China. And so when I had the opportunity to make that happen, that was maybe the first call I made was to Lagana. Said, well, we got to take this there. Yeah, no, it's been really cool to bring all that stuff back. And the Atlanta show, it's really neat. The fans are really awesome. They're really loud. They're really into it. And I'm hoping that we can recreate that same type of magic on the Hollywood program again going into 2021. It's a different mentality there for sure. All right, John Roberts.
I'm glad that Todd brought up the what is the United Wrestling Network video that came out. Because David, I think in that interview you hit on something that I think is the core legacy of the United Wrestling Network, which is collaboration. When I think of the United Wrestling Network, I truly think of all the people that have come through the doors of the United Wrestling Network, whether it be Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, Arizona, or even other places across the globe. And the legacy that they all have in their own individual paths that all can trace back to a root in their time with the United Wrestling Network. And I think that in amongst itself is absolutely an amazing rock bed that this organization has built for itself as a legacy.
Mm-hmm. All right, Andrew.
Yeah, I remember when talking about the early days of NWA Hollywood, and I thought it was great to see some sort of an extension of the NWA. And then when the news came about that the NWA would no longer be participating, or they were, somewhat breaking ties, it was almost a melancholy experience for me, saying, well, what's going to happen now? Because they're going to need that brand recognition to be successful. Otherwise, what's the show worth? It's a little bit ironic, in my opinion, that the show, once it gained its own identity, became as successful as it is now. And not only that, but instead of being inspired by the NWA to do championship wrestling, the NWA is now inspired because of championship wrestling. And I fully 100% believe that program that's running right now is 100% following in the footsteps of the work that you have done. And I don't think anybody would disagree, although you somewhat remain quiet, unless you're talking to us backstage, about how incredibly important you are to this process. And you've given so much to so many people. And I hope that you understand just how incredibly important you are to the business. And I give you a lot of shit, and it's because I like you. And I know you can take it, but you are incredibly valuable. And I think the legacy that goes on with championship wrestling is only going to be surpassed by the legacy of Dave Marquez.
No, thank you for that.
Man,
Okay.
he really wants that announcing job back.
I was saying, now hire me back.
Jeez.
I think he's
If
going
you've
for the
not-
Take
gold.
it easy,
If
brother.
you've not seen his TikTok, there's no reason for him to come back. The man is brilliant. Okay, Mental Guasto.
I'm going to keep it quick because it's almost midnight. The show's gone on way too long. All right. One word, persistence. I mean, who would have thought? I would assume almost at 500 episodes now. I mean, It started off as NWA Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. Obviously, the current people the people in charge of the NWA at the time completely ruined everything. We kept going. And then the resurrection of the NWA came back and then became a part, like Todd mentioned, of the show, which was an amazing experience. And now you look at you guys, almost 500 episodes. I mean, that is just amazing. And it's given so many people so many opportunities, and it's really just a canvas for people to get creative. And so, yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
All right. Thank you. Okay, Blake.
Yeah, so when I think legacy, I kind of think of what lives on after something's gone, you know? And I think something that's always going to live on is going to be the talent that's come through, the things they've learned, the growth they've had, and the trajectory that Championship Wrestling from Hollywood gave them in their career to be where they're at now. You know, there's been a lot of people who have come through that have been that, I mean, like the guys that are currently big name people, you know, like MJF's doing big things, you know, along with a bunch of other guys. There's some, you know, Peter Avalon, another guy who's doing big things now. You know, I think the legacy that really that'll always be there, the people that pass through there, and the mark that Championship Wrestling made on their careers, and then all the fans that have watched, you know, the impact it's made on their lives, particularly the workers that have come through and what it's done for their careers.
Well, thank you for that. Okay, Grant.
I agree with everybody. I think that Championship Wrestling from Hollywood will be remembered long after, the great legacy for what people see. But I want to talk about something that maybe people don't see, and that is just, I really wanted to get into wrestling like around 2000. And I was talking to somebody who had been involved on the East Coast with wrestling. And he said, Grant, you do not want to get involved because it is a sleazy business. Everybody backstabs each other. Everybody is horrible to each other. You don't want to get involved. And then 10 or so years later, when Dave, you came to me and you said, "Want to get involved?" When I went in, you know, I like you, I like Mike, but when I went in, I was a little bit like, okay, is this going to be? And it was totally not like that at all. Everybody backstage is just a good friend. I mean, looking around at all these faces, and even the folks who I have not worked with, I just know you're good people because that's who works with Dave, is good people. And even though I haven't been involved with the show for a while now, you know, I know I could reach out to Dan and be really good, you know, do something together, whatever it is. Reach out to anybody who is here and anybody who's not here. So
we'll go dancing.
That I think is that's right. That is a lot of that is a legacy I think people don't see, but that will remain within us that are here talking about it long after. But it's not going to go anywhere. Come on, Dave.
Well, you don't know right now. We're trying our best to keep it up and going. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. I love you all for participating in this project, this ongoing evolution of professional wrestling television. This program, again, is called the Marquez Mentality, and I would hope you would agree that all these people have that. In some ways, some people may think that's a negative thing, but that's their problem. So we missed everybody who was not able to join us, and I hope to catch up with them later, and maybe we'll do this again. And I have no idea what this show is going to be. Nick is producing with me, as are a couple other people. We're trying to enhance the show. This show will normally be live on Tuesdays, but because of what's going on in the world, we just felt it's best to go ahead and tape it, record it, and play it back on Wednesday. So with that, if you have any questions, you can, or suggestions, I'll send it over to Jeremy. Tell them where to go.
Follow us on United Wrestling on Twitter or United Wrestling Network on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
All right. You can ask questions, suggest guests. We'll do our best to bring people on because of my network of people in the professional wrestling industry and show business in general. You know, who knows what's going to happen here. I want to have fun with this and just let it be an outlet. So once again, thank you, everybody. Again, sorry for keeping you up late, old man LaQuasto on the East Coast. But thank you all for being here. Be safe. Take care of each other. Good night.